What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the GGN Radio podcast. Today, I had a conversation with Chopin, the co founder of Symphony, formerly known as Cadence Protocol. It was a very interesting conversation regarding the user experience on chain and the whole chain abstraction stack. Symphony is looking to improve our lives on chain and how can they solve the UX problem. So, let's jump into the episode. Hey, Chopin. Welcome to the show, man, and thanks for coming. Can you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your background? How did you start in crypto, and what drove you to be a founder?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and thank you for having me. So I'm Chopin. I'm the CBO and co-founder of Symphony, previously Cadence Protocol. Um, and I guess what got me into crypto, right? I actually came from a more traditional background. So I used to work in the aerospace industry, building hypersonic aircraft at a startup. And then I moved into spacecraft systems for building a lunar habitat module for obviously the moon. But got into crypto as we all do as a trader. But then being an engineer in my background, kind of fell in love with tech, did a deep dive. Then I met up with my other co-founders when I moved to DC. And we all got together and started Cadence, and they come from more actual crypto backgrounds. So they come from like Kraken, Axelar, Consensus, and MetaMask, building DeFi infrastructure, interoperability, messaging, stuff like that.
Cool. All right, that's cool. And so you guys were building Cadence, and now you rebranded to Symphony. Can you give like a brief intro on why Cadence and like why did you guys switch it to Symphony, and what's the difference between like both protocols?
Yeah, of course. So when we first got our start, right, the vision was, I guess, a lot smaller than it is today. So initially we started as a hackathon project on the Canto blockchain, and that kind of birthed Cadence Perpetuals, which was the leading perpetuals DEX on Canto, and it did very well. We did about 300 mil in volume, $1 million in revenue in 4 months. But we had just sunset that project, that protocol actually. So it's no longer with us, RIP. But what happened is that as we were building out Cadence Perps, and the vision behind that was to create the most efficient use of liquidity for these multi-asset liquidity models. So we incorporated like LSDs, RWAs, and Canto specific CSR, which is on the Canto blockchain, to make the pool much more capital efficient. But as we progressed and we were building out Cadence Perps, we got hit to all the tech that was coming up, and we realized that there was like this big need in the overall DeFi market, namely to solve two big issues, which was liquidity fragmentation across all chains, and in solving like the very poor user experience that we did today. So we've been building Symphony now for about like a year and a half, and developing that in tangent with Cadence Perps. But now we're going full on Symphony, and if Cadence Perps was like a V1, Symphony is like a V10,000. So it's basically like a whole new protocol, and they don't really relate to each other anymore now. So now we're full Symphony.
Oh, cool. Yeah, and the perp space is kind of like saturated, right? It's a pretty like a lot of people do that. I think because I don't know if because most people are like traders, come as a trader to the space, and then like, all right, what should I do? Let's build like a exchange. And yeah, it's a tough market with like a very few differentiator. In like most perp decks is only they drive volumes through incentives, and then incentives dies out and the decks like start to falling apart. It's been like the history of the game for perps for I think like since GMX. It starts with the GOP farming, real wild stuff, and only Hyperliquid and GYGX basically survived. It's a tough environment. And regarding Symphony, yeah, you said about the bad UX that we get here in crypto. Yeah, the UX we have here, we're not gonna have like mass adoption, like holding private keys, bridging to other chains. Sometimes like you need to money, like you have money on Solana, you need to get it on Polygon, something like that, and it takes like 10 minutes to get there. It's like no normie would ever do that. It's like dude,
No.
the financial incentive need to be like huge for somebody to do that. And even then, like people maybe just will give up, like most people do. So yeah, it's a very in need like solution what you guys are building. And can you like give an overview on Symphony on like all the like the different pieces of the stack, and so how everything like works? Don't need to deep dive in the very technical parts,
Yep.
but just an overview on the architecture and like everything.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. And I'll preface that with like Symphony. So we started Symphony to solve that universal pain, right? Like, so
Yeah.
anybody who's ever used crypto, no matter what application, whether it's perps or anything else, everyone knows that universal pain that you just kind of described, and that terrible UX where, you know, you finally get into crypto, you finally got convinced. Now you got to go use all these tools, wallets, bridges, whatever. You got to trust all these weird dexes you never heard of, and it's just simply not it's not scalable. It's not like, it's not even usable right now, right? And like if we're trying to onboard more people into crypto, it's funny because we're trying to solve that issue of onboarding more people rather than to solve these fundamental issues that like liquidity fragmentation, the poor user experience. It's kind of like having a party but you haven't cleaned your house yet. Why would you invite people in yet? But Symphony is right. It is we're building the first agnostic execution network. And what that means basically, right, is that essentially anything you want to do in DeFi, you can come onto our platform, and we built the full stack, vertically integrated. You could come onto our platform, be able to trade any asset across any chain without the need to use bridges, wallets, deal with gas, deal with multiple transactions, any of that headache that we deal with today. Actually, all that is abstracted away. And so the first product that we're building on top of this generalized network is our perpetuals aggregator. So we work with all like the top protocols across very multitude of chains to aggregate them. And right now, like you can come on to our Symphony platform when it launches and be able to interact with all those protocols from whatever chain you're on without having to even know or even go there. And right now, we actually are the fastest cross-chain execution path in crypto. So we can do cross-chain executions in under 3 seconds.
Oh no.
So if you're like, if say you have assets on, Base and you want to trade on GMX Arbitrum, instead of having to go bridge over there and like deal with all those middleman fees and everything like that, you could just come on a Symphony, say I want to trade on GMX Arbitrum, and boom, like in 3 seconds you've opened a trade. So that was what kind of doing it, and I think a lot of aggregators before us kind of like walked so we could run in a sense, right? So a lot of them kind of handheld you through the UX, the poor UX of crypto, where we actually completely remove it. And I think that's one of our key differentiators.
Yeah, you were like the first one that can do this like cross chain, right? Because I never heard of any perps aggregator that could like
Yeah.
do cross chain interactions. So how does it work in the backend? Through intents, or you use like integration with some bridge like across Stargate or anything, or you have your own extra infra for it?
Yeah, exactly. So it's intent based. And we actually, like I said, we built the full stack. So we actually don't really have a reliance on any specific bridge or other protocol. I think it's kind of funny in crypto that for the sake of like posting a partnership tweet, a lot of people make themselves reliant on other people in crypto, which I'm all for like co-working and like collaboration in crypto. But at the end of the day, everyone is still a startup, and you shouldn't put too
Yeah,
much reliance on another protocols, because at any day, anything can go wrong. And then you have this domino effect.
sure.
So we took that like experience and mitigated a lot of the external risk by creating this like vertically integrated protocol. So actually, yeah. So no, there's no actually for the user, there's no bridging, right? So we have our own solver network that we deployed, and it will actually be the first permissionless solver network. So anybody, once we launch your solver SDK, anybody can come on, spin up, become a solver, and participate in the network to facilitate trading across. And one unique feature there actually is that instead of like versus other intent protocols who do some stuff similar, our solvers actually don't have to participate in the trade itself. And there's like very little to no risk of like their money ever being like have any effect on there, because you don't have any trade participation, and you can actually reuse the collateral in the most capital efficient way possible in crypto right now. So you can really use the same collateral for multiple trades every 2 minutes. It's essentially like, actually, we did the math and we can capture 100% of the average perpetuals on-chain volume, daily volume, with only $3.1 million, which is crazy. And that's not much at all in crypto.
Yeah,
And
it's like the volume, like the daily volume is like, I think it's like $4 or $5 billion, maybe for the whole industry.
yeah,
I'm not following very close, but I think something around that. Hyperliquid is doing like 4, and the rest of the guys like 2 together. Yeah,
yep.
it's very like small collateral for this much volume. So how does it work? Before we move, just let me explain to the audience if they don't know how Intents works. So when Intents is basically, if you wanna do a bridge, I'm gonna use the bridge example. So I post there I wanna bridge like USDC from Solana to ETH, and these guys they're gonna send this transaction for a solver network. It's basically like a network with a different market making bots, and these bots gonna, who has better execution, better pricing, they're gonna win the auction, and they gonna deliver the money in the other chain, paying a small fee. So all right, now how does it work? So you get like, you don't have the trade, you said, and you can like take a loan. So can you explain a little bit more, elaborate on that? Because
Yeah, yeah. And I think actually, like, I guess our origin, or like our, story might help with this. So it's funny that you mentioned bridges and stuff like that. And right now, like, bridges are not fast enough to do, for especially for perps, where speed is like key in everything we do. So when we first started, right, we were first trying to make this omni-chain perpetuals aggregator with layer 0, and we had long talks with their team, right? But we found that the messaging in the past is not fast enough. I mean, even if you look at like Stargate, for example, right, some of the 2 fastest chains, which is probably like, I don't know, like Optimism to like Base, or right, that still takes at minimum like 30 seconds to a minute. And that's as fast as that is for like maybe swapping and what we're used to, that's not usable for perpetuals.
yeah.
So what we did is we actually flipped the script, and we do it by what we call optimistic execution with a callback function. That's a little techie there, but basically we optimistically execute your position on the other chain with the solvers. So you lock your collateral on whatever chain you started on, call it chain A. The solver locks their collateral on whatever chain, the protocol that you're trading on, call that chain B, right? They front your collateral onto the trade. Once that trade is executed, the callback function comes back. Your collateral on chain A unlocks, goes back to the solver, and basically kind of do this handshake operation. And that's what enables this like no bridging, 3-second execution path, and probably the fastest that you can make it in crypto.
Well, basically just verifies, right? It verifies, it's there, and lock and then unlock. Oh, that's interesting. You guys are the first. You said you were first doing that.
Correct.
Oh, cool. And regarding like the other pieces of the stack for like a projects like working in chain abstraction, you said you built your own solver network, and all the solver networks like permissionless. And so in this case, like the market maker, does he take like a basis point fee or something like that for each transaction, or
Yeah. So what we do is we took a more capitalistic approach to the economics of solvers. So solvers actually get to create their own fees, and like state their own fees. And what we plan on how that will work, right? So if, say, instead of us dictating what the fees, like the specific fee should be for every solver, if you're a better solver, you should obviously make more money, right? But also, by doing this, it enables the market to find a fair market value of what people are willing to pay for convenience. And that's kind of how we see it. And then as a solver gets better, say like you're a really good solver, you made a really good algorithm, you're out competing everybody else, you want to charge more, that's fine, because you did more work, right? Obviously. This just kind of like incentivizes solvers to create these better algorithms, find better routing, match users' intents much better than it would be if we were like, I guess, the Communist Party dictating everything else behind the scenes, right? So that's kind of like how we took the approach on that. And I guess to that point, right, we sell convenience. It's much stickier, and that's kind of why you still see It's stickier for user retention, one, right? Because better user experience, people love that, right? That's why
Yeah.
DoorDash exists. That's why like Ubers exists, whatever. Um,
And
and if you look at like the perpetuals market right now, right? Still like 96 to 98% of perpetuals trading still happens on centralized exchanges. And those aren't even necessarily the cheapest or best for you. Like there's a lot of pros to being on chain, especially, right? Self-custody, all that. But people like the convenience of centralized exchanges. And that's why they stay there, right? So we're kind of breaking that script. We allow like even a better experience than centralized exchanges, but with all the benefits of being on chain in a decentralized manner. Yeah, there's a lot more features that we could go into later, but yeah.
yeah, I think the thing with the centralized exchange is besides the convenience is just for like a regular person to don't want to self custody. Centralized exchange is great. The distribution now is like the network effects is huge. So I think like a great example of like the convenience, people pays like 0.8% for a swap in MetaMask swap, and they're like doing like hundreds of millions of dollars in
Yeah,
revenue, and doesn't make any sense. But
yeah,
for us like the regular Degens,
yeah. It's actually funny you mentioned that MetaMask swaps, because our CEO Vivaldi, when he was working at MetaMask, that's actually what he was working on. So he's the one that actually like started that whole like, oh, let's see how much people are willing to pay, and they like started with like 0.9, 0.8 right percent, which is pretty hefty in the world of swaps,
yeah,
right? And they
yeah,
were like, their theory was that, you know, maybe they care, but people will rather pay for convenience rather than like find the cheapest. And they were right, right? Like you mentioned, like it was like that. So it's a much more stickier operation in it when you solve users' real problems rather than the scenario when you're just trying to be the cheapest exchange out there. Um, because that's more like a race to the bottom. And honestly, we actually might end up being the cheapest if you take into account you not having to pay all the middleman fees like gas fees, bridging fees, any of that, and also like tax events. It's much less tax events because you're not actually doing it. Those
you're
operate.
just yeah just doing one transaction. Yeah, it makes
Mhm.
sense. And before we move into the other parts of Symphony, one thing that you said that got into my head is like you're building as like very business oriented. You- Before here, I was just recording another podcast, and me and the guys we were chatting about like most new builders coming to crypto are starting to we're starting to get this like business oriented like building. Before we had like let's see what sticks, and a lot of products that don't have like a path to become sustainable. Stake VC money, token numbers goes up, we sell tokens and all these shenanigans. And now we're seeing like more people like business oriented, and this is great for like the industry to progress.
Yep.
And so how do you guys take this approach? You guys like planning on doing like some revenue share, and like how are your business model gonna be like in the end game? Because you're starting with a perplex, but you're planning to aggregate like everything, right?
Correct.
So,
Mhm.
so can you like talk a little bit like about your business models and
Yeah,
how you take the decision? I know you said a little bit right now about convenience stuff, but can you like go a little bit deeper on that?
for sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, great points. So we actually kind of like a hybrid business model. So we're B2C, like business to customer, but also business to business, B2B, in the sense that like by being this kind of like net catch-all of every protocol, right? We don't actually compete with anybody that we work with versus like a lot of other protocols, right? So it's a very symbiotic relationship that aligns, like business wise, that aligns like the users, chains, and protocols all together on the same team. And that's kind of our model with Symphony that we're building. So essentially, we align all the incentives of like those, like the convenience factors, because right, if you're like, say you're GMX, right? Um, what we offer them is essentially access to users, liquidity, deal flow, volume, from any chain that they're not already on, right? So like this is not like we are selling them the same customers over again, right? It's we're selling them customers they did not have access to before, right? And we also upgrade their legacy like contracts by enabling like intense and account abstraction that they cannot do right now because it's legacy. Um, so there's a lot of like B2B there, and there's a lot of B2C. Um, Another thing you mentioned, revenue share. Yeah. So when we just put out a proposal that just got passed with flying colors by the community for the launch of our new token called SMI. And so that will be the first dynamic token actually that is aligned at both the application level and the infrastructure level. So each new product suite that is built on top of Symphony will like add value to this token. So it's very scalable and it scales alongside the actual protocol itself, which has not been something that's done before in crypto. A lot of times the token is kind of just created out of thin air. It has like a staking purpose or whatever. And then it kind of like, that's basically all the utility. The utility for us, right, is the SMI token will consistently, like I said, like scale with each product. So after perpetuals, right, it's like you said, anything that you can be executed into DeFi could be routed through Symphony to get all those benefits. And so that's like bridging NFTs, swapping, dynamic yield generation, fiat on-ramping, off-ramping, etc. Right? Basically anything you can execute can be routed through those. And with each new integration that we have built on top into a product suite, more value goes back to our holders. And you can actually, we'll have this feature where you can stake. You can either, there's multiple actually. So you can stake your SMI token, earn some revenue share. You can also use your SMI token to help solver provision. So instead of like, say you want to be a solver, and that's why it's permissionless, right? Say you want to be a solver, instead of you having to have like millions of dollars, and that's like filters out 99.9% of people, right? You can actually group up with a bunch of people, put this money to work with virtually no risk, and you guys earn the fee revenue from participating as the community solver. And that's
this is like pooling it, like you can, if you can like bond some tokens, you can like pool some capital and participate, something like that.
Correct.
Oh, that's an interesting tokenomics. It's an interesting tokenomics design, like something that we're missing in the industry too. We've seen like some new DeFi protocols like innovating on tokenomics, and we have all the regulatory stuff that it kind of like put some brakes on it. But we're seeing something cool, and this with like the rev share and like the ability to work with the solvers, I think it's interesting. And so you guys, do you have like a date for migration? You're gonna have a sell? Can you talk a little bit more about tokenomics, because it's very interesting?
Yeah, so the Symphony SMI token, the TGE, will happen by Q1 of next year. In between that, we'll actually have Symphony launch before then. So we will be launching alpha access, because we have to do it, because we can't do testnet because no protocols that we integrate have a testnet. So we had to do this phased rollout. So we'll have alpha access, and that's in about like 2 weeks actually. So it's coming up. So it's been a very exciting time, and actually a lot of really cool stuff will be released over the next like those 2 weeks in between. So that, and then we'll move on to beta launch, which will be more open to a lot more people. And then obviously we'll have TGE and then a public launch. And then that's kind of the roadmap right now. We posted a roadmap on our Twitter as well at Cadence Protocol is the handle. If you want to go check that out for anybody listening. But yeah, so essentially that's kind of the path forward for us. And then this SMI token will just integrate back into the system as that happens.
Oh, cool. Nice and interesting. Yeah, I actually saw the roadmap when I was like preparing for the podcast. Very interesting. Yeah, that's cool. Let's come back now to the protocol, to Symphony, and to the other parts of the stack, because you said you want to become like to verticalize everything and become a one-stop shop for like DeFi users. So you have like you said account abstraction already, like you're working with it. And so are you going to build an integrated wallet that's like they use account abstraction, and you're going to use some like magic link or some privy to integrate wallets? And so how are these like legal blocks works?
Yeah, of course. So actually that's I'm glad you asked that, because one of the cool features, like, and it's just a feature, right? It's not even our whole thing where this is, some people, this is like their whole product. But actually, like, so we have a unified wallet or smart account that we call a Symphony smart account. And so that actually unifies all your scattered assets, all your dust anywhere across any chain that you have. And you can, instead of having to bridge that all to one chain like you normally have to do today and leave some behind because it's too little to bridge or whatever, you can actually combine that all and use that as collateral for a trade. So we like combine all that into one asset, because right, our thesis is that you shouldn't care what chain you're on. It can matter what chain your assets are on, really. You should just be able to do what you want to do in crypto and not have to deal with any of the in between like intricacies. So we actually do work with like, I guess the first time not mentioning it, but yeah, we are partnering with like Privy and looking into other wallet providers. But essentially what we do is you can come onto our platform via account abstraction, and you can create one of these smart accounts. You could do that with your current EOA, or you could do that with like obviously like the social login, so Twitter, email, whatever, to create this account, and then you're good to go. Essentially, like that's all you need to do. The biggest bottleneck actually in our process is that setup, and that only takes like 30 seconds. So it's really cool. And that will be so that social login will be happening through Privy, and I actually have like what we're working on is getting like an in-house like integration with like an on-ramper as well. So just even remove even more of that like need for like going on a centralized exchange at all.
Yeah, the on-ramp is nice. It's not everybody that use, but if you're looking to onboard like people want just to send a bank transfer and get the money on chain, it's another like way for to monetize, right?
Yep.
And so that's nice. You can like integrate the stack and monetize like the whole stack. And you said you don't have any like competition doing what you guys doing. Why do you believe this, or why do you believe nobody's building like something like what you guys are building?
Yeah, so there's a lot of people working in the chain abstraction space, right?
Yeah.
And there's some overlaps with some of the features we do, right? But no one does like everything we do, so it's kind of like a little here, a little there, not much of everything. But I think the reason for that is perps are very hard. A lot of intents are still very new, but we've been doing this basically before it was even a known thing, like a topic of discussion on Twitter. But perps are very hard, so a lot of people start with like swaps. So there's a lot of people doing intents with swaps, like Cow Swap, great protocol.
Yeah.
They do
I love
something.
Alto.
Yeah. And so perps are very hard to do. So I don't think people they strayed away from that. They're trying to play into like the normal realm. We didn't. We came from a perp dex. We understand perps. We're all traders by nature. And so we wanted, and the need for chain abstraction really has the biggest implications for perpetuals. Like you mentioned right earlier in this podcast, right? Everyone kind of comes in, starts a perp dex. When a new chain launches, a perp dex launches, right? All this ever does with each new chain, with each new protocol, is just continually fragment the liquidity even worse, and it only exponentially gets worse. And now we have like the launches of like, Unichain coming out, and now you'll see all these other applications start to do their own chain. And that's only ever going to get worse, right? The fragmentation is just going to be terrible. And that's especially where like liquidity matters is in perps, point and blank, right? If you want to do perps, you have to have a lot of liquidity, or else you get eaten alive by slippage. It's not usable, and you can't do like assets. What we do is we essentially, by aggregating every perpetual protocol and all their liquidity, we create this unified liquidity layer across DeFi. So actually, we also have this feature that's called sharding. So you'll actually be able to come onto our platform with any trade size you want and be able to trade across multiple protocols and tap into their individual liquidity and execute those positions simultaneously. So if you want to do we did a demo a couple of weeks ago for the Monad event, and we did an example of a triple shard. So we did a position on GMX Arbitrum, a position on Gains Polygon, and a Gains Arbitrum as well. And all those executed simultaneously at the same price point. What this enables, right, is so we did a bunch of focus groups with like large traders and community and core community members. And we really want to kind of understand why people still choose centralized exchanges over decentralized exchanges. And a big reason of that was, the poor user experience, obviously. And then there was like low liquidity on mid-cap assets. So by creating this unified liquidity layer and this unified wallet, you're actually able to have all the benefits of new tokens popping up and new like mid-cap assets and be able to trade that with large trade sizes. And it's actually better than centralized exchanges, because if you say you have 100K or whatever, right, large money, instead of getting like paying the slippage on 100K, you can split it up across like 5 different protocols or 10 different protocols and only pay 10, like only like the slippage for 10K versus 100K is like a big
Yeah.
difference. So it's actually cheaper than centralized exchanges with that feature.
Oh, that's interesting. And how does like you splitting this? How does it affect the execution on the trade? Because the centralized exchange, yeah, the slippage it kills like even like small size traders. Like I'm not a trader, so sometimes like I do some stuff like for some rare 5 fig positions, and it depends on the platform. You will like get burned with the slippage. It's absurd. It's like it's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah.
And and when you like in the centralized exchange you don't have that but still like a mid cap or like more of a long tail assets, you're gonna get like you don't have like good liquidity even on most cx's.
Yeah.
But on you said you can like split on the during various with various different like decentralized exchanges. Oh, all right. How like does this because this gets like a little bit more latency, right, to get it done, to split it. How can this affect the trade? Like because you click one button, it processes faster, and then doing only one thing, right?
Mhm.
So all this like work in the back end. How does it affect the trade?
Yeah, so they execute in parallel. So they execute simultaneously at the same time. So like that example we did for Monad, right? We did that triple shard and it executed it still under 3 seconds.
Cool.
The biggest blocker actually is just block time of whatever like protocol you're using. And actually with like our, the algorithms that we use to route your trades to, it takes that into account. So we'll find like, obviously protocols that meet your intents, but also look into like what would be any more added latency. And if there is any added latency, it's actually really relatively small. You probably would not even notice. And it wouldn't really affect your like execution price at that point, because it's as if that was the only trade you were doing anyways, right? So like say you were doing it on GMX or you were doing it on Gains, the system treats it as 2 trades, and it's as if you were trying to do the same trade but just on different protocols. But we can actually bundle these transactions, and solvers will go out and execute it simultaneously.
Oh, cool. That interesting. And another question. Now it's more like about the risks, because every time we upgrade on convenience, we kind of everything's a trade-off, right?
Sure.
And what are like the main risks involved if I'm a user, I want to deposit like 30% of my net worth that this is crypto in Symphony. So what are the main risks that I'm taking by doing this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you use Symphony, actually, right? I hate to say there's versus like relative risk to anything else you would use in crypto is probably along the same, right? I mean, the system can go down and that's fine, but that actually doesn't matter. So, right, a big risk of like other protocols versus us is that like we display your trade in our UI, right? And you can close it from there and handle everything from there, right? But because you have this universal wallet that we created for you, you can actually, instead of like say the UI goes down or something happens and you already have a position open, you're not screwed. So that was one risk that we had, but we actually like mitigated or like removed. Was that instead of like everything being having to be handled from the UI, you can actually say you open a position on GMX through Symphony. You can, if the UI in Symphony, God forbid, goes down, you can actually go to GMX and still see your position open and on GMX and close it and handle it from there.
Oh, nice.
And actually being an aggregator eliminates a lot of risk, because we don't actually need any like protocol owned liquidity. So there's not really a reason to hack. Like hacking wise doesn't like it's not one to be like advantageous versus like other protocols who have a lot of liquidity. And then another thing is like, so you have obviously there's some solver things to figure out. But we have a lot of mechanics that encourage good behavior from solvers and like penalize bad behavior via slashing. So to participate as a solver in a network, you actually have to stake a bunch of SMI tokens, which also gives it value. And then they would get slashed if they did anything wrong, kicked out of the network, blacklisted, etc. Right? And we have obviously like we'll have like a repayment fund for anybody that would happen, but the risk is like of that ever happening is like less, like way less than like 1%. Like it's almost nil. So we've done all these, we've battle tested it. We actually are getting we'll have 2 audits done before public launch, which is probably more than any other protocols ever done. So one is by Aki, and so they're the ones who have done, you know, audits for like layer 0, CowSwap, Axelar, etc. So, you know, very reputable people. And then another one down the line, either by Aki again or by like one like Zalek is the one who's like top of the line in coding audits. And so like we thought through this a lot, and we've actually like removed a lot of the inherent risks that you might have with intent-based protocols. You know, from the solver side, right? No trade participation, so they remove that. From the user side, you're not stuck on the UI. You can go and like control everything. You have full custody, full control. And actually, I wanted to touch on that. So in other intent protocols, what actually happens is they have this weird system with solvers where it's like kind of a, you send money to a master wallet, and that master wallet's what's basically like
distribute the money.
Yeah, distributing money.
Yeah.
You lose custody, right? Like this anti-crypto, right? Our system does not have that like master wallet. So at no point during the trade do you ever lose custody or control at any step in the process, right? So we have these things in our system to mitigate, right? Like I was saying, for solvers, instead of like giving them like just sending them money like other people do, and like hoping they do the right thing and give your money back, especially if you're profitable, because a lot of protocols don't have to do that technically in their system. Our solvers via session keys are only allowed to do specific operations, i.e. open a trade. And then after that, they can't do anything. And even like i.e. open a trade is just their money anyways. So it's not like they can do anything. So at no point do custody and control of your assets ever touch into like other people. And then I guess the only inherent risk or just natural crypto risk of like, you know, you lose your password or your keys to anything. And, but essentially we removed, I hate to say that there's like no risk, but we removed a lot of mitigated a lot of the risk. And then we have like funds to back up people if anything ever happens. So
that's
feel very secure doing it.
Yeah, that's good to hear, because we're seeing like a lot of stuff. It's not even like technical problems. We're seeing a lot of like social engineering and stuff, like compromising keys. It's been seeing this a lot. And so you guys, we can, I think this risk is like most stuff in crypto. Do you guys plan to like decentralize the whole process in Symphony at someday, or you guys pretend like going run like a business, it's not going to decentralize because lose the efficiency and stuff? Or do you plan to decentralize and give away all the control for token holders in the future?
That's a good question. Yeah, so actually everything that we have and every of the processes, right, everything that's important in crypto is decentralized. So like execution, asset control, custody, everything that people like started crypto for, and everything that matters is fully decentralized at the moment already. One thing that we don't have right now yet is like a DAO, but that will come down later. You just, as a first startup, you don't want to have a DAO too early on because it doesn't just bring in a lot of red tape and you move slower. And we purposely have stayed like a nimble size for a team to remain nimble and constantly evolve alongside the market and update a lot of things as we go. That's why we've actually been very scalable. And actually, we can launch on like multiple chains, like a new chain, very scalable, like very fast, like in a day. So it's very fast process to integrate. So actually, like with all these new app chains coming out and all the new protocols, it's like good, like whatever, that's fine for us. Like, well, if we integrate everybody and we have them all in our net, okay, we at least got the winners. If some of them die off, that's fine, So
every chain that's born is like better for you, right? As an aggregator, because you can solve the UX problem.
Exactly. Yeah. It just adds more relevance to what our mission is, right? It's just like you see it like, oh yeah, everyone has a new chain now, So like I always describe it if chains and protocols are like buildings, we're like the rivers and the roads in between connecting everybody.
Yeah, that's cool. You said you're a very like nimble team right now. How big is the team?
Yeah, so we have about 9 people working on our team. So most of those are engineers. So we have, obviously the 4 founders, and then we have like front end designer, front end developer, and then we have like some more back end engineers that help us.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's you don't wanna grow too fast, overhire and stuff, because it's a very like cyclical industry, and like things change so quick.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it's you can
Actually,
go.
like that's a big issue for no matter what industry you're on as a startup. Actually, a lot of people scale way too fast. They bring on too many people because they got funding and they just don't want to do the work.
Yeah,
But as like it's very important for us that the founders stay close to the actual like development process and see it, especially as like before we even launch. Right, it makes sense. If you scale too fast, you end up like the first people that you ever bring onto your team. These are supposed to be the people that are your leaders, right? The people that are going to be distilling culture down the line to then more people that you bring on. So you have to be very conscious of how you hire, and it should be a very long process for the first couple of people that you bring on, because that sets a lot of tone and like the future problems. Because I'll tell you, it'll be a lot more work if you brought on like a bad employee as one of your first versus like you having to go do that work yourself. So
yeah,
that's a lot of reason a lot of crypto or a lot of startups in general just like fail.
yeah. A bad hiring can hurt you a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like hiring crypto is like actually it's getting harder and harder. It was supposed to get easier because it's supposed to be onboarding more people, but it's getting harder. Yeah.
Yeah.
And man, and how you said you can like plug in a chain like in less than 24 hours. In So you're gonna launch with like most of the AVM chains. Do you have like a number or
Yeah. So the goal right now, right, is we will start with every EVM chain, and that will happen. And then by public launch, we'll be on all the non-EVM chains. So we just start with the EVM just because we're already on EVM. A lot of with the exception of like Solana and kind of Sweeb, a lot of the centralized perp still happens on EVM. So it just makes sense to start there. Then we'll move on to like, Solana, Sweeb, all those other chains like Cosmo based. Just integrate them all because we say the future is agnostic, and so the chain should be agnostic, and so that's the end goal at that point. But yeah,
yeah,
it's very scalable. It's not like what was the problem for a lot of protocols before, is that you basically had to relaunch your entire application all over again, source liquidity all over again on the new chain, and it's just like, yeah, that takes a lot of time, and managing liquidity on multiple chains is a fucking nightmare, and I hate, so it's like, excuse my language, but it's like I remember our old protocol, and it's like managing like getting liquidity providers and stuff like that. It takes a lot of time away, but for us, we don't have to do that. It's very simple.
and a lot of work too, right? A lot of BD work to onboard this like big liquid providers and stuff. Yeah, it's a lot of hurdles. And like from EVM to SVM, let's say, is you said you're gonna have everything in Q1 with the public launch. So do you need we will need to make a lot of changes to get to bridging Solana into Ethereum, or it's not gonna be like that hard?
No, it won't be that. It won't be that hard at all because we've already actually cracked like agnostic bridging just as a feature that we had to build out in our current system. So we can already like bridge between multiple chains and the background for solvers, for settlement purposes. So it shouldn't be hard. The only thing is we just need to actually hire, like I'll tell you, is like we just actually need to hire like a Rust engineer because we don't know Rust. So that's basically the reason. But we're like, there's a lot in the pipeline in terms of integrations on the EVM side already. So I'm just kind of been focusing in that. And then as we like start obviously scaling up and hiring, we'll bring on more like people who know, Rust and stuff like that.
All right, cool, man. So you say you're launching in 2 weeks, right? So second week of November. It's probably when this podcast will go out. So we're probably gonna go out right after or right before you guys launch the alpha phase. So how can a user participate on that? Is there anything that people can do? Is there some points people still love points?
Still
So
love
is
it.
that some incentive for people to just try the purpose aggregator?
Yeah, of course. So we'll have a lot of incentive programs both internally, and then we have co-incentive programs with everybody we work with. So all the other protocols. So like say like GMX or whatever, or Gains or anybody like that, or Hyperliquid. Um, so that will all be ready, and that'll probably be more focused actually on the beta side of things. So alpha will be very uh, community focused, invite only, exclusive access, just kind of so we can like make sure everything still like works and test a lot of bugs and fix any bugs ready for beta. Um, but I think we'll do a lot of program like contest, like maybe like every week or 2 weeks, where we'll put out like an access code, or like a competition to earn an access code to get access to alpha. And then we have like, yeah, we'll have like some sort of I can't give away all the key details too, because we've worked actually with a lot of like virality experts from both the Web 2 and Web 3 industry. So we built
Alright.
this actual like social layer incentive model on top of Symphony that actually uh, will be very exciting when it launches. And it just, you know
Oh,
how it is with go to market, you can't give away the juice because
yeah,
people will
for
like,
sure.
oh,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So is beta still launching this year
is
or
what?
next year? Is beta launching this year or next year?
Yeah.
This
So
year.
alpha at the moment is slated to probably run for like a month, and then after that will just be beta. And beta will constantly start with more people and then scale up over time. Um, yeah, and there will be a lot of ways of getting access to beta as well.
Very cool, man. Very cool. Now I want to ask more personal question.
Sure.
And you said you were working as an engineer and aerospace engineer, right? And now like building smart contracts and stuff. How was it different for you, like this career transition, and like because doing like the Web 2 stuff, you don't have like you're not securing like people's money,
Yeah,
and the mistake is not so costly like it's in crypto. So how was like this transition and the difficulties and the challenges and stuff?
yeah. Good question. And actually, I would argue it's actually a lot more similar than you would think in terms of how you're supposed to think about it as an engineer. Um, right. So if you're thinking about like rockets, for example, right? Usually there's so many redundant systems that you have to put into, in the design process and on the rocket itself to make sure that everything works as intended. And if it doesn't, there's a system that backs it up because one, people's lives are at stake. Two, if it like gets up into space, right, and then it malfunctions, you really can't go fix it. It's not hard.
That's true.
So there's a saying is like in the aerospace industry, it's a test as you fly. And that's kind of how the same idea is when you're dealing with smart contracts and crypto in general,
Yeah.
right? Um, and then aerospace, right, is very defense oriented in the sense, like when I worked at like Northrop Grumman, is obviously the defense industry. So it's very like always maintaining maximal levels of security, and everything you write. And so making sure like no foreign like groups or any like hackers or whatever can like infiltrate, important systems. And same process is what you would think about when you're dealing with smart contracts and people's money is on it. And then obviously, right, I'm a big space nerd. It's one of my passions. And so like help build a habitat for the moon. So we're gonna go to the moon in crypto, right? So it's like
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective because yeah, I never talked to some rocket engineer before. You said you came from a very traditional background. I don't think there's a lot of people like working like building literal rockets, so it's not that traditional actually. Uh, and man, before we wrap, I at the end of the episodes, I always get ask two questions for the guests. The first one is like, how would you describe symphony in one sentence?
oh, it's a good question. Okay. Um, Symphony is the one-stop shop for everything you would ever want to do in crypto without needing to know that you're using crypto.
That's yeah, that's good. It's good. Large sentence, but it's good. It's says the message, it delivers the message. And the other one is I took this from the Kobe and Ledger Up Only playbook.
Mhm.
And can you share an alpha for the listeners? It doesn't need to be about the token. It doesn't need to be about Symphony. About anything, like as a trader, as a builder, anything.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Let me think. It's a good one. Yeah, so a little alpha in terms of uh there's so many I'm trying to think. Yeah,
If you
so
want to say two, you can say two. That's no problem.
yeah, so a little alpha that we'll be doing is that actually, so we'll be launching a and during beta we'll have a Symphony mobile app that's actually be launching. And if you download that app, it'll actually be very advantageous for you guys in terms of maybe some of the token awards and maybe a potential airdrop. Hint, hint. So be active on Symphony, and I'll tell you, like, you'll get rewarded very nicely for it. So.
Oh, that's a good alpha. That's a good alpha. People will like that. People will like that. People always like to get rewarded and free money. They love it.
Yeah,
Who wouldn't, right?
exactly.
Man, thanks for coming. And where can we find out more about you, Symphony, and like the work you guys are doing? It's time to share your project, man.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Great conversation. Yeah, yeah. And thank you to all everybody listening. Yeah, follow us on Twitter at Cadence Protocol. A lot of it, like, actually will be coming out in the next couple of weeks, and yeah, we're gearing up for launch, so it's going to be a very exciting time. So thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks for coming, man. It was a great conversation. See you around.
Appreciate it.